I want to start by having you think about what is your biggest work challenge. And I'm not talking about paying the bills, but what's your biggest sort of interpersonal challenge at work? Think about a situation that you approach with a sense of dread, that you execute with a kind of anxiety, and that you leave feeling regret, feeling like you want a do-over, feeling like you wish you had said it this way or that way. How did you forget this or that? That's the kind of situation that I want you to think about. I think when you start like coming out and knowing the menu and knowing how to answer all the questions, and I know that Garrett trains people incredibly well and also has very high standards, so I know what the expectation is here for good service. So I want you to think about what that challenge is for you and kind of stay anchored on that throughout the talk. But also you might apply it to your personal lives. So some people say their biggest challenge is, first dates, or some kind of interaction with a family member. People who have kids sometimes say the hardest thing they do is scolding their child or being a good parent, interacting in a way that's constructive. I have a 14-year-old, so I'm really like getting that right now. But think about that and how you might apply what I'm talking about to that situation for yourselves. But when you think about all of these stages, you're not really present in any of them. So when you approach those situations already feeling like it's going to go wrong, you're doing what my grandmother called borrowing trouble. Right? So you're borrowing trouble from a future that hasn't yet unfolded. You've already decided that it's going to go badly. That does not set you up to do well in that situation. When you're there, you're anxious, you're distracted by what you think you should have said a minute ago, by what the outcome is going to be if you do this wrong, but mostly you're distracted by what you think they're thinking of you. And you're usually wrong about that. And it's not useful to be worried about what you think they're thinking of you. The last is, when you leave, rather than being in the present and moving forward and saying, okay, this is what I learned, I'm gonna apply it next time, you're post-event processing. You're ruminating over what happened and thinking, oh, why did I not do this or that? You're going back over it. So let me just quickly tell you my example. My favorite example is that when I was a fifth-year grad student, I was at Princeton. I was really very much experiencing imposter syndrome the whole time I was at grad school. And in my fifth year, my advisor, who I still have just tremendous respect for, she took me to a conference that's really intended for people who've been out of PhD programs for at least 7 years. It's kind of the elite conference in my field. And every year, a handful of grad students are taken because they're really strong students and they're kind of being shopped around on the market. And so she chose me to go. And first of all, I didn't feel that I deserved to be there. And she said to me, look, the people at this conference don't really want to talk to grad students. They want to have a drink with their friend in the lobby bar, and you got to be ready to sell what you do and sell yourself quickly. So have your elevator pitch ready. I think elevator pitches are awful. I think we should never have to do them. I mean, it's impossible to communicate everything that you want to communicate in 30 seconds. So I decided to really script this and literally rehearse it. So in high school, I was in the theater, did a lot of monologues. I'm like, I'll treat it like a monologue, which, by the way, problematic already, right? Because you're like supposed to be interacting with somebody, and even on stage, in a way, you should be able to respond to an audience, but just feel what they're feeling and be able to give back to them and connect with them. So I rehearsed it. My anxiety defied all reasonable proportions. I was just completely out of my mind. I get there, and it is at some like mid-sized conference hotel in some mid-sized conference city. I don't even remember. The first event is a dinner, and it's on the top floor of the hotel. And I get into the elevator, and I'm the only student, and it's 3 men in my field who are like giants in my field. I cite them all the time. To me, they're like celebrities, and I'm just a grad student. And I notice already, and I do study body language, so I think I'm not totally wrong about this. I notice them looking like, oh shit, we have to deal with a grad student. We're gonna have to hear an elevator pitch. So I'm like this, and one of them just says to me, okay, we're in an elevator, give us your pitch. So that was my first invitation to give an elevator pitch. It was a friggin' disaster. I mean, words were tumbling out of my mouth. I kept restarting. I kept apologizing. I could not remember what I wanted to say. I think the only thing from my script that actually came out were the words, "I study." And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm letting everyone down. I'm never gonna get a job. I made in my mind a plan B in the elevator. I was like, that's okay. I could move to Vermont and be an organic farmer. I mean, it was really like, this was the end, right? And it's funny because I remembered it as being on going to the 20th floor. And I was recounting this story to a friend of mine who was at the conference when I was writing my book, because I actually talk about this at the very beginning of the book. And I said something about the 20th floor. She's like, it was the 4th floor. It was like that was it. So, in my mind, it was much, much longer. I'm looking around, my eyes are like darting from person to person to get some sign of reassurance, and nothing is coming at all. And I get to the top, the doors open, 2 of them like avert their gaze and flee. And the one who had goaded me to give the pitch, so here's the elevator, he steps across the threshold. I am, by the way, still in the elevator, and the doors are closing, and he goes, "That was the worst elevator pitch I have ever heard." Doors closed. And I like go into I feel myself collapse, right? Like I feel the powerlessness. I like sort of rock myself. I go back down to the lobby. I don't go to the dinner. And I just go over it again and again in my mind. And I didn't really get any of that conference. I didn't take any of it in because all I was doing was going over the thing that I couldn't change. So I wasn't present at all. So I love this description of that moment. Does anyone follow Maria Popova or Brain Picker on Twitter? Wonderful account to follow. She's sort of a curator of literature and writing, would you say? Okay. And also wonderful with words herself. And she described it this way: an ever-calculating, self-evaluating, seething cauldron of thoughts, predictions, anxieties, judgments, and incessant meta-experiences about experience itself. That's what's happening in those moments. I think the best teacher that I've seen at HBS, it's a place full of great teachers. I said to her once, because she's such a good teacher that she teaches others how to teach. And I said, when did you realize you were really good at this? Or when did that happen? And she said, I was in the classroom one day and I realized that I was no longer thinking of what they were thinking of me. I was just thinking about what they were thinking. And I thought that was great. So she was no longer worried about what they thought of her. She was thinking, she was perspective taking. And if you don't understand, how they're sort of weighing and taking in the information you're providing, then you can't really communicate with them, but you take yourself out of it. And I think that's exactly what we need to be able to do. The problem is that when we're not present, we hide our competence and our warmth. So the 2 dimensions that people judge each other on first are these 2, competence and warmth. And they actually do it the opposite way. First, they judge warmth. You could call it trustworthiness, likability, but I kind of like actually trustworthiness. We chose warmth 10 years ago, so I'm sticking with it for now. And competence is judged first. Think of it this way. When you meet a stranger, you want to know 2 things. What are their intentions toward me, and can they enact those intentions? Warmth is what are the intentions? Competence is can they enact them? And that's why just scores of studies with kids, with adults, looking at split-second impressions, longer-term impressions, show repeatedly that we judge warmth before competence, but that together those 2 things account for almost all of the variance in our overall evaluation of other people. So if I asked you to rate people on these 2 traits, and then I said, and a bunch of other traits, and then I said, now just rate this person from 1 to 10, from negative to positive. That 1 to 10 rating would be accounted for almost entirely by these 2. The other things would not matter as much. This is what matters, but warmth matters more. So when you're present, obviously you can't share competence because you can't access your knowledge. So in that elevator, even though I'm the world's expert on my dissertation, I could not remember really what my dissertation was about. I mean, I couldn't say, this is what I showed, or this is why it's important. So I couldn't be competent. But I was so stuck in that, in that sort of self-evaluating cauldron that I could not connect either. So they couldn't see if I was warm or trustworthy. They couldn't see that. Neither of those things could come through. How do you approach these situations with composure, execute them with a kind of calm confidence, and leave feeling satisfied? Presence, as I define it, is not this kind of grand concept, something that you reach at the end of your life as a permanent Zen state. And if you do that, great, but I don't think many people do. I think of it as something fleeting. It's something that each of us experiences every day and also experiences a lot of moments without presence. But it's being attuned to and able to access and express comfortably your authentic best self. Presence reveals itself to other people. So when we're present, other people can tell. Although they wouldn't articulate it this way, I think these are the three qualities that come across. The first is something that I sort of learned from talking to angel investors, venture capitalists, people who are listening to pitches and making decisions really quickly. And I say to them, okay, if you have 5 equally good ideas on paper, and then you're looking at the pitches and you're choosing one person, what are you looking for? And usually what they say is not what they're looking for, it's what or as a good sign, but it's what they're looking for as a bad sign. And I think everyone in here has been in sales in some way, right? You kind of know that. I mean, even as kids, if you had to sell something for school, like if you don't like it, you can't sell it. People pick up on that. When we're present, we believe our story. We believe that what we have is valuable. So for me, again, back to the elevator, it's not that I didn't believe in my dissertation, but I got flooded with self-doubt before I went in, and I couldn't get in touch with that belief in it. People sometimes say to me, well, how do I sell something that I don't believe in? And my answer is, you don't. You don't do it, right? Don't do it. You can't do it. I don't think you should do it. If it's something that you don't know if you believe it, like that you don't know if you believe in it or you don't really understand it, find something about it that you do believe in, right? But if it's something that you really feel like, I cannot get on board with this, you shouldn't be selling it anyway. The second is that we convey confidence without arrogance. And that's, I think, something that we get very confused about. Confidence and arrogance, very different things. Confidence with arrogance is what we would call fragile high self-esteem. So these are people who come across as really tough in the beginning, as sort of alpha-ish, but who feel slighted easily, right? So people who get defensive very quickly, who are fighty, that's confidence with arrogance. It's not actually really confidence. Arrogance is kind of a smokescreen that's masking insecurity. It's a wall that you put up when you don't want people to challenge you. And it works, but it does not make you friends or allies or repeat customers or anything like that. It doesn't get you the job. It just gets you through the situation without people pushing back on you too hard. The last is that we communicate harmoniously. And what I mean by that is that our verbals and nonverbals align. They're synchronized. When we're telling the truth, when we're being authentic, we're not fighting ourselves. We're getting out of the way of ourselves so we can be ourselves. We don't have to choreograph our nonverbals to match the words we're saying. Presence reveals our confidence and our warmth. We are comfortable and confident enough to share and access who we are and what we know. And I think this is even more important, we're comfortable and confident enough to be trusting. And when we trust, they trust. This is something, these things go hand in hand.